The Galactic Council chamber was silent. High-ranking officials from different star empires sat in their floating seats, looking at the massive hologram in the center. It displayed a large, newly discovered battleship, one that belonged to a young species called humans. Most of the leaders were unimpressed. Humanity was new to space, barely a few centuries into interstellar travel. Their ships were considered primitive, their technology outdated compared to the great empires. The idea that humans had built something powerful enough to challenge the mighty fleets of the galaxy seemed laughable. Admiral Vorkin of the Zorith Dominion crossed his four arms and smirked. He had fought many battles and crushed many rebellions. He had seen what true warships looked like, and this human ship, it was nothing more than a large piece of metal floating in space. A nervous scientist from the research division spoke, his voice trembling. The human ship, called Invictus, is unlike anything we have seen before. We detected energy readings that do not match standard galactic weapons or shield systems. We believe. Vorkin waved a hand dismissively. You believe what? That these primitive creatures suddenly built something that can rival the Zorith fleet. That they somehow broke the rules of war. He laughed, and some of the other leaders chuckled as well. But not everyone in the chamber was laughing. Grand Strategist Orlun of the Velar Union, a species known for their caution, leaned forward. His species had a long history of studying potential threats before dismissing them. We should not be so quick to judge, he said slowly. The humans are unpredictable. They do not follow normal patterns. If they have truly created something new, we must understand it. Vorkin rolled his eyes. Then let me handle it. I will take my fleet to the Sol system and see this Invictus for myself. If it is as weak as I expect, I will make an example of it. If it is truly a threat. He paused, his smirk returning. Then we will erase it before it becomes a problem. The chamber murmured in agreement. The Zorith Dominion had the strongest fleet in the known galaxy. If anyone could put these arrogant humans in their place, it was Vorkin. The council gave its approval. Vorkin turned and left the chamber, already imagining his victory. Days later, the Zorith fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system. 50 powerful warships, each capable of turning planets into dust, glided through the void like hungry predators. Their weapons were primed, their shields at full power. They had come not to negotiate, but to show dominance. Scan the system, Vorkin ordered from his command throne. His officers worked quickly, analyzing human ships moving between planets. As expected, most of them were small, outdated designs. Cargo ships, patrol vessels, and a few military frigates, none of which posed any real danger. Vorkin chuckled. Pathetic. They don't even have proper defenses. Then the sensors picked up something different. A massive structure was moving from behind Earth's moon. The Invictus. It was far larger than expected, nearly 3 times the size of Vorkin's flagship. It moved with slow, deliberate motion, its hull blackened and scarred, as if it had already seen battle. But what caught Vorkin's attention was the absence of traditional shield energy. Strange, muttered his tactical officer. It's not emitting the usual defense fields. It should be vulnerable. Vorkin smirked. Then this will be easy. He activated the fleet-wide comms and sent a message to the human ship. This is Admiral Vorkin of the Zorith Dominion. Surrender your vessel immediately, or we will open fire. There was a long silence. Then a reply came through. A human voice, calm and confident. Come and see. The message ended. Vorkin frowned. It was not the desperate plea he had expected. There was no fear, no hesitation, just an invitation. And that unsettled him. Admiral Vorkin sat in his command chair, staring at the screen in front of him. The human battleship Invictus was fully visible now, floating silently near Earth's moon. It was massive, far bigger than any ship the Zorith Dominion had ever encountered from a young species. Its dark metal hull looked ancient, as if it had already seen war. But what confused Vorkin the most was its lack of shield energy. Every advanced species in the galaxy used shields to protect their ships, but this human vessel had none. According to every rule of space warfare, that meant it was vulnerable. A mistake. Vorkin smirked. Humans were foolish. "Commander," he said, turning to his second-in-command, "have the humans responded to our demand?" "Yes, Admiral," the officer said, shifting nervously. "They sent only 3 words. Come and see." Vorkin's smirk faded slightly. That was not the response of a species begging for mercy. That was confidence. Why? No matter, he thought. He had 50 warships. The humans had 1. This would be over quickly. He activated the fleet-wide comms again. "This is your final warning, humans. Power down your vessel and surrender, or we will open fire." No response. Vorkin's patience ran out. "Fire a warning shot." One of the Zorith cruisers charged its plasma cannon and fired. A glowing blue bolt shot through space, heading straight for Invictus. The humans did not move. They did not activate shields. Vorkin leaned forward, expecting the shot to tear through the hull. But just before impact, something strange happened. The plasma bolt bent. It curved away from Invictus, as if space itself had twisted. The energy blast veered off course and vanished into the darkness. The bridge fell silent. What was that? Vorkin demanded. His tactical officer checked the readings, his hands shaking. "Admiral, their ship is using gravitational manipulation." Vorkin narrowed his eyes. "Explain." "They didn't block the attack. They'd redirected it. They'd bent space around their ship, making our weapon miss." That was impossible. The Zorith Dominion, one of the most advanced empires in the galaxy, had never mastered gravitational weaponry. Even the oldest species in the Galactic Council had only theories about how to use gravity as a shield. And yet, these humans, this young, primitive race, had just done it effortlessly. For the first time, Vorkin felt uneasy. He stood up. "Enough games. Full attack. Destroy that ship." His fleet obeyed. Dozens of plasma cannons and energy torpedoes fired at Invictus. Space lit up with deadly light, a storm of destruction heading straight for the human battleship. And then, the universe broke its own rules. The energy blasts vanished before reaching the ship. Some curved away and flew into empty space. Others were pulled into nothingness, disappearing as if they had never existed. The human ship did not move, and yet it remained untouched. "How?" One of Vorkin's officers whispered in shock. Then Invictus fired back. There was no bright plasma, no energy bolts. Instead, a single projectile shot forward at terrifying speed. It was a solid metal slug, launched at a velocity the sensors could barely track. The railgun round tore through a Zorith cruiser. The ship didn't explode like it would from plasma fire. It simply broke apart, its metal frame unable to withstand the impact. One shot. One kill. Vorkin clenched his fists. This was wrong. No species used such weapons anymore. The Galactic Council had long abandoned simple metal projectiles in favor of energy-based warfare. Humans, however, had ignored the trends. And now he understood why. Energy shields could stop plasma. They could absorb radiation. But they could not stop a solid piece of metal moving at incredible speeds. Humans had built a warship designed for destruction, not for show. "Admiral," his second-in-command said, voice shaking, "should we retreat?" Vorkin's pride burned at the suggestion. The Zorith Dominion did not run from battle. But as he looked at Invictus, still untouched, still advancing, he realized something terrible. They had made a mistake. And humans did not forgive mistakes. Admiral Vorkin had been in many battles. He had crushed rebellions, conquered planets, and commanded fleets that turned moons into dust. Never had he faced an enemy like this. The human warship Invictus was still moving forward, slow but unstoppable. It had no shields, yet no weapon could touch it. Plasma bolts bent away. Energy torpedoes vanished into nothing. and every attack from the Zorth fleet failed. Then, in return, the humans had fired one shot, just one. And that was enough to completely destroy the Zorth cruiser. A deep silence filled the bridge of Vorkin's command ship. His officers stared at the screen, their eyes wide with shock. 50 warships against one, and already the Zorth fleet was on the losing side. "How is this possible?" one of his officers whispered. Vorkin clenched his fists. "This is not possible." His fleet was the pride of the Zorth Dominion, built with the most advanced technology in the galaxy. No young race should be able to do this. But the humans had broken the rules of war. Vorkin took a deep breath. "We are not running from a primitive species. If energy weapons don't work, then we change tactics. Switch to ballistic weaponry. Fire mass drivers." The order was given. Zorth warships adjusted their weapons, switching from plasma to kinetic rounds, high-speed metal projectiles designed to tear through armor. No shields, no energy defenses, just pure destructive force. Dozens of mass driver cannons fired at Invictus. The metal slugs moved at incredible speeds, streaking through the void toward the human warship. Unlike plasma, these could not be bent or absorbed. If humans relied on physical armor, these rounds would punch through it. But Invictus had other plans. Just before impact, the human ship shifted, not through movement, but through gravitational distortion. Space itself warped, and the projectiles missed, sliding off an invisible force like pebbles thrown into a river current. Vorkin's eyes widened. The humans had not just built armor. They had weaponized gravity itself. This is not possible," his second-in-command whispered. "Admiral, we cannot fight this." Vorkin felt rage burning inside him. "We are the Zorth Dominion. We do not retreat." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. The battle was already lost. Humans had built a warship that ignored every known rule of space combat. Shields, energy weapons, plasma technology, none of it mattered anymore. "Admiral," a panicked voice called out. "The humans are hailing us." Vorkin turned sharply. "They want to talk." For a moment, he considered ignoring it. But then, curiosity won over pride. He nodded. "Open the channel." The screen flickered, and a human appeared. The figure wore a dark uniform, their face calm, their eyes cold and sharp. This was no desperate commander. This was a warrior who knew they had already won. "This is Captain Darius of the Invictus," the human said, his voice steady. "We gave you a chance to leave. You did not listen." Vorkin gritted his teeth. "You expect us to fear you." "The Zorth Dominion does not bow to primitives." Captain Darius did not react. "You misunderstand. We are not here to make you bow. We are here to teach you a lesson." Then the transmission ended, and Invictus fired again. A second railgun round shot forward, moving at nearly the speed of light. It smashed through another Zorth cruiser, tearing it apart in an instant. Panic spread through Vorkin's fleet. Ships began pulling back. Officers shouted over comms, and fear took hold of soldiers who had never known defeat. Vorkin sat frozen in his chair. He had always believed that the Zorth Dominion was the strongest force in the galaxy. But now, for the first time, he realized the truth. Humans were not weak. Humans were not primitive. Humans had built something that should not exist. And now, the entire galaxy would have to face the consequences. Admiral Vorkin's fleet was in chaos. 2 of his warships had already been destroyed, not by some advanced energy weapon, but by a simple metal slug traveling at near-light speed. The Invictus, the monstrous human battleship, remained untouched. It had no shields. It had no traditional defenses. Yet nothing could hit it. Vorkin could feel the fear spreading among his officers. Some of them whispered about retreat, something unthinkable for the Zorth Dominion. His fleet had crushed countless enemies. And yet, here they were, standing against a single human ship and losing. His second-in-command turned to him, voice trembling. "Admiral, we cannot win this battle. We must withdraw." Vorkin clenched his jaw. Retreat. Against humans. Never. He slammed his fist against the armrest of his chair. No, we still have more ships. More weapons. I refuse to believe this species has surpassed the Dominion. But deep down, doubt was growing in his mind. He turned to his tactical officer. Find me a weakness. There has to be one. The officer scanned the readings, but his face remained pale. Sir, they are using gravity-based defenses. Every time we fire, space itself bends around them. Our weapons cannot reach them. Vorkin growled. How had humans achieved this? The technology to control gravity was theoretical, even for the most advanced species. Yet humans had not only mastered it, they had built a war machine around it. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think. If they can deflect our attacks, then we must close the distance, order all ships to advance. We will board them. There was a moment of hesitation. Then the orders were relayed. The Zorath fleet moved forward, warships accelerating toward Invictus. If long-range weapons were useless, then they would fight face to face. They would storm the human ship and tear it apart from the inside. But the humans had other plans. A new signal appeared on the sensors. Something was coming from Invictus. Admiral, a crew member shouted. They have launched. He paused, confusion on his face. Small ships. The display showed a dozen human fighters rushing forward. They were tiny compared to Zorath warships, barely larger than attack shuttles. But they moved fast, faster than anything Vorkin had ever seen. He laughed. They send tiny ships to fight us. Pathetic. Destroy them. The Zorath warships opened fire, plasma cannons unleashing a storm of energy. But just like before, the shots missed. The human fighters moved like ghosts, twisting and turning at impossible angles. They did not follow the laws of physics. They ignored them. They're using the same gravitational technology. The tactical officer yelled. They're bending space itself to dodge our attacks. Then the human fighters returned fire. But they did not use energy weapons. No plasma. No lasers. Railguns. Each fighter fired a storm of metal slugs, tiny but moving at absurd speeds. The shots tore through Zorath ships like paper. Without energy shields, the Dominion fleet was vulnerable. One destroyer exploded, then another. Vorkin's mind raced. This isn't war. This is a massacre. He could feel his officers looking at him, waiting for an order. His pride screamed at him to keep fighting. But his instincts, the instincts of a warrior, told him the truth. They had lost. The humans had built a fleet that did not obey the rules of the galaxy. They had created weapons that ignored every defense. And they were not stopping. The comms flickered to life. Captain Darius of the Invictus. You wanted to see our ship, Admiral, the human said calmly. Now you have. Leave or be destroyed. Vorkin looked at the battlefield. His forces were being torn apart. He had no choice. With great difficulty, he spoke the words he had never spoken before. All ships, retreat. The Zorath fleet turned and fled, abandoning the battle. For the first time in history, the Dominion had lost. As his ship jumped to hyperspace, Vorkin sat in silence. Humans were not weak. They were not primitive. And now, the galaxy would fear them. The Zorath fleet limped back to Dominion space, their defeat a scar on their pride. The battle had lasted less than an hour, yet it had rewritten everything they thought they knew about warfare. Admiral Vorkin sat in his command chair, staring at the empty void outside his viewport. His hands were clenched into fists. He had never lost before. But this was more than just a loss. This was a warning. The humans had built something impossible. They had turned gravity into a shield, made energy weapons useless, and wielded railguns like they were the most advanced weapons in the universe. The Dominion had believed humans were primitive. They had been wrong. As soon as Vorkin's fleet returned to Zorath space, the news spread like wildfire. The Dominion Council was in an emergency meeting within the hour. Dozens of high-ranking officials, warlords, and strategists gathered in the Great War Chamber. Vorkon stood before them, his expression grim. He had already sent the battle recordings ahead. The room was silent as the footage played. They watched as plasma bolts bent away from Invictus. They saw railgun rounds tear through Dominion warships like paper. They saw the human fighters dance through space, dodging every attack with ease. And they saw the fear in the eyes of Zoreth soldiers as they retreated. When the footage ended, no one spoke. Finally, one of the council members, an older Zoreth with deep scars from past battles, leaned forward. "Tell me, Admiral Vorkon," he said, voice cold, "are humans a threat to the Dominion?" Vorkon took a deep breath. "They are more than a threat. They are a force we do not understand." Murmurs filled the room. Another official, a war strategist, frowned. "The humans have one ship. One. We still have thousands." Vorkon shook his head. "If they have built one, then they can build more." That silenced them. For centuries, the Zoreth Dominion had been expanding, conquering weaker species, absorbing their technology. But the humans were different. They had developed their technology alone, without guidance from the rest of the galaxy. And now, they had surpassed everyone. The council leader, an older Zoreth named Kether, narrowed his eyes. "Do they seek war?" Vorkon hesitated, remembering Captain Darius's words. "We are not here to make you bow. We are here to teach you a lesson." "They did not chase us," Vorkon admitted. "They only defended themselves. But their message was clear. If we attack them again, they will not hesitate to destroy us." The chamber fell into uneasy silence. Then someone else spoke. A deep alien voice echoed through the chamber speakers. "This is quite the revelation," the voice said. The Zoreth turned toward the large holographic screen at the center of the room. A new figure appeared, a member of the Galactic Council. Other species had been watching. A reptilian diplomat from the Vrax Empire spoke first. "The humans did this to you, with just one ship." A representative from the Udrak Collective, a species known for their powerful energy weapons, crossed his arms. "This changes everything." The Zoreth had always boasted of being one of the strongest forces in the galaxy. But now, before every major species, they had been humbled. A cold realization settled over the room. If the humans had truly mastered gravity-based warfare, then they held the key to the next evolution of space combat. And if the rest of the galaxy did not act quickly, they would be left behind. Kether leaned forward. "We must decide, are the humans our enemies, or our greatest opportunity?" The question hung in the air. Some wanted revenge, some wanted alliance. But one thing was certain. The entire galaxy was now watching Earth. Across the galaxy, the news of the Zoreth defeat spread faster than light. Empires, coalitions, and independent warlords all heard the same shocking story. One human battleship had crushed an entire Zoreth fleet. Some species laughed, thinking it was a lie. Others grew nervous, realizing that the impossible had happened. And a few, the wisest among them, began to prepare. Because if humans had won Invictus, they could build more. On Earth's Lunar Command, Captain Darius stood in the command center of Lunar Base Alpha, the primary military station of Earth's defense force. Large screens displayed information from across human space. The galaxy had noticed them. A communication officer turned to him. "Sir, multiple factions are sending messages. Some want to negotiate. Others demand explanations. And the Zoreth, well, they're silent." Darius smirked. He wasn't surprised. The Zoreth had learned their lesson. He turned toward a woman sitting at the strategy table. Admiral Renee Carter, the supreme commander of Earth's defense fleet. She had been the one who approved the construction of Invictus when others doubted its purpose. "They're afraid," Darius said simply. Admiral Carter nodded. "Good. They should be." For centuries, Earth had been ignored by the greater galaxy. The older species saw humans as young and inexperienced. Many thought Earth would either become a minor trading world or get conquered by a stronger force. But humans had survived wars, disasters, and near-extinction events. They didn't follow the rules of the galaxy, and now they had proven it. "Send a message," Admiral Carter ordered, "to every major power in the galaxy." The communication officer nodded and activated the transmission. Across the stars, leaders of empires and war councils received the first official statement from Earth. A simple message, spoken by Admiral Carter herself. "Earth does not seek war, but if war comes to us, we will end it." The message was clear. Humans would not start conflicts, but they would finish them. The galactic reaction. The Udrak Collective, a race of tall, insect-like beings, held an emergency meeting. Their leader, Chancellor Zithral, tapped his claws on the table as he replayed the human message. "This is dangerous," one of his advisors hissed. "If humans can truly manipulate gravity in combat, our energy fleets are useless against them." Another advisor nodded. "We must study their technology. We must send spies." Zithral considered this. The humans were an unknown factor, but they had already proven one thing: they would not be ignored. Meanwhile, in the Vrax Empire, a reptilian warlord named General Orc watched the battle footage again and again. His warriors, some of the strongest in the galaxy, stood behind him in silence. Finally, he grinned. "I like them," he said. "They fight with strength. Maybe one day we will test them. But not yet." Across the galaxy, opinions divided. Some feared humanity. Some wanted to steal their technology. Others saw them as potential allies. But one thing was clear: humans were now part of the galactic stage. The Zorith response. Back in Zorith space, Admiral Vorkin sat alone in his private quarters. His personal screen played the human message on repeat. "Earth does not seek war. But if war comes to us, we will end it." He let out a slow breath. They are not conquerors. That should have been a relief. But somehow it made things worse. If humans had won just to prove a point, it meant they weren't just powerful. They were confident. And confidence in war was a dangerous thing. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. A private message from the Zorith High Council. He opened it. "Prepare for war." Vorkin closed his eyes. Fools. They still didn't understand. The Zorith had lost one fleet. If they attacked again, they wouldn't just lose ships. They might lose everything. And this time, the humans wouldn't just let them run away. Admiral Vorkin stood in the great war chamber of the Zorith High Council, his fists clenched behind his back. He had spent his entire career as a warrior, leading victorious campaigns, crushing enemies under the might of the Dominion. But now, the Council wanted him to do something he knew was suicide. "We must strike back," one of the High Lords growled, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The Dominion's honor is at stake. If we let the humans stand unchallenged, other species will begin to think we are weak." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. The Zorith had ruled through fear for centuries. If that fear faded, rebellion would follow. Vorkin took a deep breath before speaking. "The humans are not like the others we have conquered." The room went silent. The council members stared at him. "Their technology is beyond anything we have encountered," Vorkin continued. "Their battleship Invictus single-handedly destroyed our fleet. If we fight them again without understanding their capabilities, we will not just lose the battle, we will risk the Dominion itself." One of the council lords scoffed. "You sound like a coward, Admiral." Vorkin's eyes darkened, but he controlled his anger. "I am a warrior, not a fool." The Supreme Chancellor, an old and cunning Zorith named Kether, leaned forward. His eyes gleamed with calculation. "Then tell us, Admiral, if you were in charge, what would you do?" Vorkin hesitated. He knew the answer, but he also knew they wouldn't like it. "I would not attack," he said finally. "I would watch. I would learn. And when the time is right, we would act with knowledge, not blind rage." A low growl filled the chamber. The warlords of the Dominion did not like waiting. They wanted revenge. Kether's gaze remained locked on Vorkan. And yet, we cannot afford to do nothing. The galaxy is watching. They must see that the Zoreth Dominion still rules through strength. Vorkan knew what was coming before Kether even spoke the next words. "We are launching a second attack," the Chancellor declared, "and you will lead it." A heavy silence filled the room. Vorkan's heart pounded. He had expected this, but he had still hoped that logic would win over pride. But Zoreth pride had already cost them one fleet. Now it would cost them more. "Do you refuse this command, Admiral?" Kether asked. His voice was calm, but there was a warning in it. Vorkan knew that if he refused, he would be stripped of his rank. He would be disgraced. He could not stop the war. But maybe he could control it. Slowly, he bowed his head. "I will do as ordered." Kether smiled. Good. But as Vorkan left the chamber, his mind was already racing. He needed a plan. Because if he followed this foolish order blindly, the Zoreth Dominion would be destroyed. On Earth's lunar base, Captain Darius sat at a meeting table, watching as intelligence reports came in. The humans had intercepted Zoreth communications. "They're coming," said one of the officers. "A second fleet, bigger than before." Darius nodded, unsurprised. He had expected this. The Zoreth were too proud to accept defeat. Admiral Carter leaned forward. "We are not going to let them dictate the terms this time." Darius smirked. "Do we send another message?" Carter's expression was cold. "No." She pressed a button on the table. A hologram of the Invictus appeared, along with several new ships in production. "This time," she said, "we show them why humans do not lose wars." Admiral Vorkan stood on the bridge of his new flagship, Dreadfang, staring at the fleet before him. Hundreds of warships, the largest the Zoreth Dominion had ever assembled. A force meant to crush humanity. But Vorkan knew the truth. Numbers would not be enough. He clenched his fists behind his back as his second-in-command, Commander Therak, stepped beside him. "We are ready to enter human space, Admiral," Therak reported. His voice carried the same arrogance as most Zoreth officers. "This time, we will not fail." Vorkan did not answer immediately. His mind replayed the last battle, the way human technology had turned their weapons useless, the way Invictus had torn through their fleet. "This is a mistake," he muttered under his breath. Therak frowned. "Admiral." Vorkan turned to face his officers. "The High Council is blinded by pride. We do not understand human technology. We do not know how many Invictus-class ships they have now. If we attack blindly, we will be walking into another defeat." Some of the officers shifted uncomfortably, but Therak scoffed. "We have overwhelming firepower. No species has ever survived the full strength of the Dominion." Vorkan sighed. "This is why we will lose." A soft chime echoed across the bridge, an incoming transmission. "From the humans?" Vorkan asked. The communications officer checked the signal. His skin paled. "No, sir. It's from the Galactic Council." Silence fell over the bridge. The Galactic Council rarely interfered in wars. For them to send a message now meant the entire galaxy was watching. "Put it through," Vorkan ordered. The holographic screen flickered to life, revealing a multi-species council chamber, a Vrax warlord, a Udrak chancellor, and several other high-ranking officials stood together. A tall, reptilian diplomat spoke first. "Admiral Vorkan of the Zoreth Dominion, we strongly advise you to halt your attack on humanity." Murmurs filled the bridge. The council was taking humanity's side. Vorkan folded his arms. "And if we do not?" The Udrak chancellor narrowed his insect-like eyes. "Then the Zoreth Dominion will stand alone." Gasps filled the bridge. Therak took a step forward. "You threaten us?" "No," the diplomat said coldly. "We give you a choice. Withdraw or suffer the consequences." The transmission ended. A heavy silence settled over the bridge. Therak turned to Vorkan. "The council is bluffing. They will not risk war for humans. Vorkin was not so sure. The Council had seen the battle footage. They had seen what humanity could do, and unlike the Zorith High Council, they understood the danger. The humans had changed the balance of power. And now, the galaxy was choosing sides. "Sir," the navigation officer said suddenly, his voice tense, "we have multiple contacts, incoming from human space." Vorkin turned sharply. "Show me." The holographic display shifted to reveal a fleet of human warships exiting FTL. It was not just Invictus anymore. The humans had built more. Several gravity-shielded battleships, each armed with the same terrifying railgun technology, emerged like predators from the darkness. A transmission arrived. Admiral Carter appeared on the screen, her expression unreadable. "This is your final warning, Admiral Vorkin," she said. "Turn your fleet around. Now." Vorkin's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of the moment. The Zorith Dominion was at a crossroads, war or survival, and he had only seconds to decide. Admiral Vorkin stared at the human fleet on the holographic display. The Invictus-class battleships hovered like silent guardians, their gravity shields making them nearly untouchable. The humans had not been idle since their last battle. They had built more weapons, more defenses. They had prepared for exactly this moment. And now, the entire Zorith fleet stood on the edge of destruction. A message from Admiral Carter blinked on the screen. "This is your final warning, Admiral Vorkin," she repeated. "Turn your fleet around. Now." Silence filled the bridge of Dreadfang. Commander Therak clenched his fists. "We should fight. If we retreat now, we will be seen as cowards." Vorkin ignored him. His eyes remained locked on the fleet before him. The Zorith Dominion had ruled through fear and strength for centuries. They had crushed countless species, believing they were the most powerful in the galaxy. But today, everything had changed. Humanity had shattered that illusion. For the first time, the Zorith were the ones facing extinction. A deep breath. A final decision. "Open a channel to the fleet," Vorkin ordered. The bridge crew hesitated, but obeyed. Across every Zorith warship, his voice echoed. "This is Admiral Vorkin. All ships, stand down." Gasps filled the command deck. Officers turned to him in shock. "Admiral," Therak began. Vorkin spun to face him, his gaze burning. "This war is over. If we fight, we die. And we take the Dominion with us." The silence stretched long and heavy. The officers exchanged glances, their rigid loyalty battling against the reality before them. Finally, the communication officer whispered, "Orders relayed. The fleet is standing down." Vorkin exhaled slowly. On the main screen, Admiral Carter nodded. Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't look surprised. "You made the right choice," she said simply. And then the human fleet vanished into FTL, leaving the Zorith fleet intact but defeated. The battle had ended before it even began. The aftermath. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Zorith Dominion had retreated. For centuries, they had ruled with absolute power, destroying anyone who opposed them. But now they had backed down. Because of humans. Some empires celebrated, seeing the Zorith weakened for the first time in history. Others grew fearful, realizing that humans were far more powerful than they had ever imagined. But for the Zorith themselves, it was the beginning of the end. Their High Council tried to cover the defeat with propaganda, claiming it was a strategic withdrawal. But the truth was clear. The Dominion was no longer unstoppable. And the galaxy now had a new force to fear. On Earth's lunar base, Admiral Carter watched the latest reports from her office. The Zorith had retreated, just as she had expected. Beside her, Captain Darius smirked. "So, that's it. They finally learned their lesson." Carter shook her head. "Not yet." Darius frowned. "Then why did you let them go? We could have wiped them out." Carter glanced at the holographic display. The Invictus-class fleet was just the beginning of humanity's true military strength. Because we don't need to conquer them, she said. We already won. Darius chuckled. And now the whole galaxy knows it. Carter allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had been ignored, underestimated, and dismissed. But not anymore. Now, they were a power the galaxy could not afford to challenge. And this was only the first look at what they could do. The end.